Welcome back to the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, also online at the big1050.com. It is a Thursday, the 9 o'clock hour, and obviously Ira has departed. He is going to be heading up to Flint to be with Sam and the rest of the Webb family. As today is the funeral for his younger brother, who unfortunately passed away over the weekend. So they left me the responsibility. This is a bad idea. The responsibility of essentially moderating the MGoBlog Roundtable, which we are live on Ticket TV on all the platforms you're used to, Facebook, the Michigan 24/7 YouTube channel, on Sam's Twitter, and I have just went live on our Instagram as well, Big 1050, so you can or WTK 1050. That being said, want to welcome the guys from MGoBlog. They're here with us. They're here with me right now. Seth Fisher, good morning. How are you, sir?
Good morning. I'm surprised they left you in charge of us. It's we're a rascally group, you know. It's going to be a little tough.
Why they left the child of the station to run this thing and moderate is beyond me, but here we are.
It was like the one time I came in studio and I got to sit in Sam's chair and I was like, "Ooh, I got buttons."
It's like, ooh, they put a big board in front of me. Someone that I'm pretty sure probably was a child at one point, but the hair says otherwise. Craig Ross, good morning, Craig.
Hi, how you guys doing? Good to be here. Sorry for Sam and his family. It's awful, but
absolutely. And of course, anyone that's maybe watching or listening, if any thoughts, prayers, condolences, whatever it may be, any positive well wishes sent to the Webb family. And of course, joining us as well, too, to my bottom right on my screen is one Mr. Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you, sir?
I'm well, and of course, we're all thinking of Sam right now.
Absolutely. And hopefully the game plan is that he said he wants to be back in the air chair tomorrow. We're going to give him whatever time frame that he wants to for bereavement purposes, obviously. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, as there's a lot that's obviously that is going on in the Webb household. But with that being said, gentlemen, a heck of a victory this past Saturday, 27-24, come from behind over USC. Seth, I'm gonna let you go ahead and start off. Tale of two halves, basically, is what this was.
Man, mean, the halves were. Michigan barely had the ball in the second half. Just they had the trouble getting off the field in one drive, and then they got the pick six on the next drive. So then there was no offense for that one. But they couldn't pass the ball, and I don't think that people are like, oh, they can't pass the ball because of Alex Orji. I don't even think that's true. Maybe Brian's UFR looked different, but from my view, the defense played out of their minds. The defense won them this game, and Kalel Mollings won this game. But I don't think the reason they couldn't pass was actually Alex Orji. I think the reason they couldn't pass is they couldn't protect him long enough for him to even drop back. So, there were a couple times where they do try to drop back, and just Evan Link gets teleported around by was it Anthony Lucas, and that's it. So it was a more fun game to experience than to break down.
Yeah, there was a strange thing that happened on Friday night. Maybe it happens more often than I think, but I noticed on Friday night that 75% of the public money was on USC at 6.5 points. And then Friday night, the line dropped an incredible number, 2.5 points, which was quite remarkable in that business for it to go. And so what was going on was, even though the money was on USC, the bookies were asking for more USC money, which is generally not the way these things go. It's the opposite of the way things go. And so someone came in at the last second, probably, and laid just a lot of money on Michigan on Friday night. I mean, a lot of money. Either that or the bookies wanted to gamble on this game. And it was the first time where it gave me some pause that somebody knows, something more than the public, and maybe this game was going to be a lot more competitive than the fans, the Michigan fans I talked to, thought it was going to be. I talked to Ed Feng about it, that's kind of his business these days, and he said no. It was some whale came in and just dropped millions upon millions of dollars on Michigan at getting 6.5 points. So in any event, that was unusual. The other unusual thing that happened to me early in the game, big picture, was that a guy who's a very nice guy who sits in front of me occasionally, when we saw the James Madison score, that James Madison had given up 70 points to UNC, told me
UNC gave up 70 to
Yeah,
James Madison.
opposite, right?
You would have thought it was a
Thank you.
basketball game that was playing in
Yeah,
in September.
70 to 50, I thought it was. And he told me that Greg Robinson was the defensive coordinator for UNC. And I
Oofta.
yeah, and so I actually told someone that, maybe David Nasternick, and he didn't correct me, but I went and looked it up and realized, no, unfortunately, Greg has passed for the last 2 years. And so it was not Greg Robinson who was the UNCDC, but we do play Minnesota, and they gave up they held
31 points, which is about 29 more points than Iowa had scored probably all of last.
Yeah. So I'm not sure about that, but they also played UNC and held UNC to 19, I think. So in any event, those were my sort of non-game thoughts about this one. That and the fact that I don't know what your experiences were, but mine with USC fans was quite good. The USC fans around me rooted for their team, trolled us mildly near the end of the game, and then were humblified at the end of the game, which seems appropriate all the way around. And afterwards, I went over to the USC, one of their boards, Sunday, I went to one of their boards, and they were really positive about their experiences in Ann Arbor and positive about Michigan fans, and said aside from the loss, it was a really good experience for them, which seems to me how it should be. So that made me feel quite good. These are my non-game thoughts. Brian probably has some game thoughts.
Brian?
Yeah, I guess I do. I mean, so I'm going over the offense, and one thing that jumps out is that they're really barely running anything that could be construed as zone read offense. So there's a bash in the first half. There's another instance where the defensive end is let loose, and Orji makes the mistake to hand the ball off instead of keep it, and that's pretty much it for the game. And there's a couple of instances where Michigan runs Orji as the quarterback, but this didn't really feel a whole lot different than the J.J. McCarthy playbook minus all of the passing. And that's not a great sign for down the road, because there are ways to take advantage of the fact that you have a running quarterback, and it looks like Michigan wasn't really prepared to do that. And I did mention that Orji mess up one of the reads, and so it's like, well, maybe he can't do it, and it's like, well, if he can't do it, he really can't play. And you gotta, I mean, at that point, it's just like, well, what did you spend the offseason preparing for? It doesn't really feel like the answer to that was Alex Orji.
Well, let me ask you that question, because early on, when we were talking about the season, I had said we don't know if Alex Orji can pass, and we don't even know if he can read or hand the ball off, because all we had seen last year was a few wildcat plays. And I talked to Ed Feng this week or after the game, and he said he didn't think Michigan could be successful going forward with Orji. And I thought, well, I don't know. I just don't know at this point whether that's true or not, but he was pretty adamant about it. I mean, what do you guys think? Is Ed way off the mark or not?
For one, Brian prefers us to call that offense the cat orgy. There's two ways you can use a running quarterback, and and we saw it with Denard Robinson, who was not very good at zone reads either. And what they do is they have the running back bail or running back lead block. You use him as just an extra guy, and you play 11 men and you run the quarterback. But also, you have to have some sort of read. So with Robinson, they would have him, step down, and then and then they'd have that, if the safety's coming down, he could just pop it really quick to, they call it QBO nose, or the
Hey, those aren't those weren't reads. Those were not reads. Those were called play action passes.
Yeah.
But one thing that did take advantage of is the threat that Denard posed just by moving towards the line of scrimmage vertically. And we really didn't see that from Orji. Basically, all of his runs were crack sweeps or the occasional arc read. They didn't try to get him vertical except once when they ran bash, which is back away. They brought Morgan in jet motion and they threatened a handoff to him. And a lot of USC's defense was focused on a potential jet sweep to Samaj Morgan. They run a counter the other way, and that was 14 yards, which is their best result on the ground other than the three big chunks, which I regret to report were down to what USC was not doing often more than what Michigan was doing. So to me, it is somewhat good news that they took on a Power 5 defense that looked decent against LSU, and they were able to score 3 touchdowns without doing anything downfield at all, and without really using their quarterback as an option threat. So they have some ability to move the ball, but they're going to play better defenses than USC, and better defenses are not going to be giving up 50-yard touchdowns on a regular basis on conventional run plays, especially when you can put all of your safeties in the box all the time. So I'm like, the time to talk about how like this is an excellent win and Michigan's doing the thing was Monday, Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, and now we're at Thursday, and like kind of the grim reality from this game is that they didn't look prepared to have Alex Orji as their quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, from the point of view that I was having at the very least, and I kind of go back to even the first 3 games, that the offensive line has been, hasn't really been able to hold up a pocket long enough for whether it was Davis Warren or Alex Orji to kind of step up in the pocket. And I think a lot of people have criticized and analyzed the out route that Samaj had, where the CBS had said, "Oh, there's no one open," and they show Samaj breaking away. But at that time, you look at it, and the pocket is already broken down at this point where he doesn't have an opportunity to chuck the ball downfield. Yet you go back to that Texas game as well too, and everyone is naysaying on Alex where, oh, he can't throw the ball, when he's been sitting on the bench for 98%, 99% of the game, and now you're asking him to go ahead and throw an out route to, I think it was to Timo, to Tyler Morris, I think at the time. And like how are you supposed to set up any kind of time for your quarterback to get something going when it just seems like we're kind of seeing it with a little bit with the DBs as well, where it's almost like a rotating door sometimes, where you're trying to rotate some of the guys in that we saw Wink do, I think, in the first game against Fresno. But I think at the same time that there was, there's, I think, maybe a potential injury concern with Will Johnson, I think, at the time, possibly. But if you can't find a way to hold a pocket up, how do you expect your quarterback to throw the ball downfield or have the time where your receiver is able to break away from a defender?
Yeah, and I mean, there was, I think, exactly one drop back pass in this game that was not immediately pressured, and Orji throws a pretty bad flat fade route to Tyler Morris when Marlon Klein's open on a skinny post in the middle of the field. And so I don't think that you can just completely absolve the fact that, Orji had an opportunity, wasn't able to take advantage of it, and the way that they're handling him in this offense suggests that it was very rough during fall practice. And it is what it is at this point. Like, they made mistakes in preparing for this season. They thought that they could rep a bunch of JJ McCarthy plays and maybe one of their quarterbacks would come around and be able to execute that kind of offense? And the answer is no, they can't. And so what are you going to do now? Like, are you going to try to just batter it out against Minnesota, or are we going to see a little bit more in terms of creativity, option football, the idea that you might actually throw downfield once in a while? I mean, that's one of the things that, I guess is underrated about Denard, who wasn't an NFL quarterback, but if you gave him an opportunity and you gave him a situation where there was a guy running open 30 yards downfield, he would put it on him. And we haven't seen that from Orji yet. But one thing that we haven't seen is we haven't seen Orji have the opportunity to do that because of two things. One, it's the pass protection. And the other is the structure of the offense, which absolutely refuses to take advantage of the fact that Alex Orji could be a threat vertically. So we're not seeing power read. We saw the one bash run with counter. We don't see the kind of things that we saw under Rich Rodriguez that made that offense effective despite having a rudimentary passing game. So I'm not particularly optimistic about this changing going forward, because over the course of the past 9 years, nothing in this department has really changed. They just don't want to run this kind of offense, which makes me wonder why they recruited Alex Orji at all.
I think that I imagine, because Harbaugh used to always recruit one athlete and one passing guy. It was like that was the system that he had all the way through Stanford and even into his early career at Michigan. That's what he always was going for.
I mean, I don't
hope,
think
I
that
think, is
he,
that they could
I
turn
don't,
him into a
wait,
quarterback.
I don't think that they've recruited anyone who's as much of a quote unquote athlete as Alex Orji.
No, it
There's
stopped.
nobody.
It stopped in 2016, really. So I mean, that was
he didn't. He never brought in anyone of that ilk at Michigan. Period.
well, he had.
Like
I mean, they had Gentry at the beginning, but that was
Gentry was always going to be a tight end.
Tight end.
Like he got a cup of coffee. Like this is a different situation. So, this is, I mean, there were opportunities to put USC in conflict like we saw on that bash run. And I'll put a video up on the site later today where it's like, oh, wow, half of this defense is no longer looking at Alex Orji. And for them to do it once and only once, it's kind of like, what are we doing here? And
yeah, I mean, that's what the Matt and Seth show was about today. I put that up yesterday too. And that's what we were talking about. Like, you can see the safety is overreacting on that play. You can, and then even on other plays that you could see the potential, because the split zone that they get against that they give on Kalel Mulling's first touchdown, right? That's just a regular split zone. They catch USC in a like a crack replace. So it's a win by play call design, but you also see the safety on that play heading outside because there's a potential for an Orji keep. So you can see it in the offense.
I mean, but that's not
purposely. It's not on purpose. Yeah.
But that's not a Michigan thing. That's a USC thing, because they already have a scrape exchange on. They already have contain for the quarterback. If Michigan's playing Iowa, that safety is not out of position. So like for me going forward, I'm not looking at USC screwing up on plays where they have the quarterback already contained as a positive for Michigan, especially because the way that Alex Orji was used in this game, it feels like if there was any excessive concern about Orji, like keeping the ball on option plays, which is why you would run a scrape exchange in the first place, that's seriously mitigated by what we saw against USC. I just don't think we're going to see defenses spend that linebacker outside because Michigan isn't forcing them to do that. So there's always like a bump when you put in a new quarterback, because like you don't really know what his strengths and weaknesses are. He hasn't been scouted. And once this gets on tape and once this has been fully scouted, it doesn't feel like the kind of thing that's very resilient. It kind of like seems like the kind of thing where it's like we're going to go 3 and out 3 times to start the second half because they've kind of cottoned on to what we're doing.
I mean, a couple of thoughts on Harbaugh. I agree with you, Brian. I don't think Orji is the kind of quarterback that I can recall that Harbaugh ever brought into the program. But what Harbaugh, to some extent, has this sort of at core sort of emotional sensibility. He brings in Davis Warren, even though I don't think the kid has cancer. He loves the kid. He brings him into the program because he has some ability, and he's willing to take a chance on a kid that he really just likes. And I think it's sort of the same for Orji, who is, a terrific person and someone that Harbaugh just liked his family and said, this is a great athlete, is the kind of person I want in my program. We'll figure it out. And I think there's some Harbaugh in that. But I guess I come back to the question, and Brian's answer was very subtle in the sense that, to my question, in the sense that he's saying, I don't, let me try and paraphrase it. You're saying, I don't know if Alex Orji can be a success in the program, but it's not so much because of Alex Orji, it's because of the way he's being used right now. Is that fair, or is that not fair characterization of what you're saying?
Well, I do think he has limitations relative to Denard that make him like a little bit less likely to be a success in that context of offense, but he's not in that context of offense. We're not using him to lighten the box. We're using him as like an occasional, we're going to get 8 yards because we're going to run the quarterback, which is what they did with JJ McCarthy. The ratios are a little bit different, but the structure of the offense is not.
Yeah. So out of that, it's why Ed says perhaps their best chance going forward is with Davis. And but I don't know. I have no idea.
I mean, he's a guy who punches in numbers, and like he's not a guy who like charts. So
right. I understand that. Yeah, it's fair.
I mean, I wanted to explain something because we're talking about why they recruit Orji. What I was saying about that, like Harbaugh used to always get one athletic guy and one pocket guy, and almost always the athletic guy turns into something else. And I'm sure when they looked at Alex Orji, he was just a freakish athlete and a freakishly good guy. And I think that's the kind of guy that Michigan's been recruiting for a long. Kalel Mullings, they looked at him and they're like, is he a linebacker or a running back? Well, we love this guy, right? And they try to make him a linebacker, and that didn't work in that. And he's a fantastic running back. Michael Barrett, they looked at him like he was a quarterback in high school. They looked at him, they brought him in, and they didn't know if he was going to be a running back. They didn't know if he was going to be a linebacker. They didn't know if he was going to be they made him a Viper at first. And then he found his calling at weak side linebacker late in his career. This program brings in athletes and sees what they're going to be. I don't think
but they don't leave them. They don't be
our offense.
They don't leave them at quarterback, and so
that's the point. Yeah.
I mean, what we're seeing right now is Michigan finding themselves in a bad situation and then not really having the flexibility to adapt to that situation and mitigate what's happening. And given the quarterbacks that are on the docket coming up, I don't think that Michigan is maybe going to spend a whole lot of time making that, and they're just going to eat this season, and it's not going to be a very good season. But that's what the situation is. They're not adapting to their talent. They're asking their talent to adapt to them.
So we're going to want to make the transition from the offense to the defense. I think that at the very least, the first half defense looked outstanding, forcing a lot of pressure on Moss. I mean, if the field were dirt as it was back in the day, I'm pretty sure he'd be coming up looking a little more. That white jersey would be a heck of a lot more brown than it was leaving at halftime. But again, it was almost like a story of two halves, where the first half, again, your special teams able to pin USC deep and able to stop any kind of forward momentum for the most part. But then you come out in the second half and, it turned into USC almost kind of figuring out how the defense was going to, how to kind of work the defense to a degree. Again.
A little bit. All right. So, yeah. And because there was a press conference with Wink Martindale yesterday where he took umbrage with people saying that he blitzes all the time and that he's over blitzing, which is true. If people are saying that he's blitzing a lot, he's not. He did against Fresno State, and then he had just weird things that he was doing, but in against Texas. But since then, he's really come down and most of the time lets the players play what they're doing, and that's come down. When he does bring pressure, or when he brings a guy, because he brings 4 a lot, but it's the amoeba defense, right? So he's not going to bring the same 4 every time. So when he's bringing that extra guy, you bring in a linebacker, or if he's bringing Quentin Johnson from the linebacker level, what he's not doing, what Minter and McDonald were really good at, is covering the spot that guy's coming from. So the weak side linebacker, he's normally covering that hole, right? And that's normally his zone in the base cover 3. When he comes, the first place the quarterback's going to look when he sees that guy is that hole, and you have to cover it. You have to. So he gets the ball out on a 3-man rush when Derek Moore actually wins that rush. And this, it's not a huge problem. This is a very fixable issue. It's just the design of your coverages has to take that into account. And it was something that Michigan was very good at the last 3 years and has not been very good at under Martindale. And it's, I'm not at the point of like, oh, Wink sucks. Like, at this point, he's still adjusting, and he's having a hard time, I think, adjusting to college. And I think he also, when we were looking at him as like this genius who invented the amoeba defense, he also had Mike McDonald and Jesse Minter on his staff and had other people helping him design coverages for what he's doing. I think that the college game is, it's just a different feel, and he hasn't gotten the feel of it yet. So, but they're down to down. Michigan was still dominating. Down to down, they could not block Kenneth Grant. They could not block Mason Graham. They could not block Josiah Stewart, and they couldn't block Derek Moore. All of those guys graded out fantastically. And it's not just because, and it's not like USC has a terrible offensive line. They were an okay offensive line coming in. Texas has a great offensive line. Texas was the one team that was able to stand up to Josiah Stewart a little bit and be able to like slow him down. But he turned it up to a different level this game. It's hard as an NFL coordinator to understand that kind of talent differential, because you never play with that. You never, even when you have Aiden Hutchinson, you're not playing with a guy who's that much better than everybody else on the field. And Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant and Josiah Stewart and Derek Moore are that much better than almost all the guys they're going against. So down to down, this Michigan team dominated. And when they just played their regular base, they dominated. You can't play your base all the time, though. You have to blitz 25% of the time. Wink is correct. You have to, that he's running the defense that Michigan asked him to run. He fixed the issue after Fresno State that he was blitzing too much, but it's still, he's getting a feel. And people wanted to draw me into the conversation because Wink was mad about writers writing about him. I think it's Joe Klatt that he's mad at, not me.
That's correct.
Yeah, because like I'm not saying that he's blitzing too much. I'm saying that the design of his blitzes they're not taking into account that like college quarterbacks, the level they're at is they're going to see someone coming and they're going to look to that spot immediately.
Well, the one thing the one play in particular that I kind of looked at and I damn near was pounding the table in the studio when it actually broke down was I believe it was the second touchdown that USC had scored to make it 20-17, I think at the time, where you had I think it was Zeke. Zeke came in on a corner blitz, but no one picked up.
A bust.
Exactly.
Yeah,
but
somebody got the wrong play call.
Yeah, where someone.
I mean, it's a bust, but like, why are you running zero coverage from the 16 on 1st and 10 when your defensive line has been actually dump trucking that offensive line? Like what? Like what goes through your thought process when that's like the defense that you're calling there? Like, because obviously someone busted, but like what? Like, why wasn't there anyone deeper than like 7 yards on that play? Like, it's just the things that he's doing occasionally, like that he seems to want to do, just don't make any sense in the context of the game that he's playing in.
Well,
like,
at the very least, like you would have thought that if Zeke was going in on the blitz, that there was someone that may have realized like, hey, he's going on blitz, you got to cover this man, but you had one defender on that side of the field to cover 2 guys.
Yeah, well, you're
also,
talking,
I mean, so you are talking about a blitz, but like, I mean, a bust, but also that blitz is from Mars. Like he's way outside the hash. Like there's no way that anything that he ever does is going to be relevant. So like, how is that even an option? So I mean, and the play before that, they back Josiah Stewart out on 1st and 10 and ask Ike Iwunu to set an edge from like a 4-eye, which is basically a defensive tackle position. And surprised it doesn't come off and they get an easy 13 yards. And I'm just like, just play it straight up. We see what happens when you play it straight up because you have 4 NFL first or second round guys on your defensive line. They are whipping these guys. There's no need to get cute.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it is an NFL line. I mean, you put this line in the NFL, and in a couple of years, they probably look pretty good. And so, your point is reasonable. I mean, why ham it up? Why come with complicated things when if you just played at Iowa and played it simple, you're probably going to beat them because you're better than they are. Your defensive front is better than the USC front. So that's a fair question. You wanted to speak to that, Seth, but
yeah, we're there because they had one big run in this game.
Yeah.
And the one big run is on a 3rd and 2. All right, now God, I mean, you have the best defensive line in college football right now, and I know that Ike Awuna is on the field at that moment instead of Mason Graham, but you still have Kenneth Grant on the field too. Okay, and you're just whipping these guys. It's 3rd and 2. USC cannot run the ball. Every time they've tried, they cannot run the ball. You have that advantage, and Wink calls a double A gap blitz, which is they split the defensive line, create a big gap in the middle, and then expect the linebackers to fill it. Now, Jayshon Barham is the one who screws that one up. He's supposed to go and attack. The only reason Barham wasn't blocked, though, is because one of their offensive linemen got confused and went the wrong direction. So it's like, why are we playing games? Right? I'm not saying Wink called the wrong play. That play is a sound play, and it can defeat that play. It's not like an X's and O. It's not a rock, paper, scissors game. It's a, why are you playing rock, paper, scissors? Right? Play football, because we have the better football team. When they're on offense and we're on defense, any team Michigan plays this year, up to including Ohio State possibly, we have a better team than they have. And the way to, if you're a big stack, you don't have to play like the small stack. And it's not like he does it all the time. I'm not saying this happens all the time. It's occasionally, as Brian mentioned. But occasionally, he just does something that just makes no sense in the context of the game he's playing. And it's not like a huge change. And I'm not saying don't do anything weird ever. I'm saying you just got to have kind of a feel for when to do that. And
one guideline is don't do it on a standard down. Don't do it on 3rd and 2. Don't do it on 3rd and 4. If you want to get weird, fine, get weird, but make sure it's a passing down. Like I guess there's this assumption that you can't run the ball, which I think comes from the NFL, where it's just like, they're going to throw the ball because it's 3rd and 2, which is not the case in college. And I just feel like he's pulling out all these like stops to try to get 3rd down stops, and it's counterproductive. And maybe he'll adapt to that, but it is just kind of mystifying sometimes when he's coming from a place where teams are more equal, so he doesn't have a defensive line in the NFL that is just going to dump truck the opposite offensive line, even in a ranked game like this one was, where there was a giant mismatch and there was really Michigan just needed to do absolutely nothing at all. Just sit there and watch the carnage, but he just didn't have that patience, and that's not his mentality. And I think that's a reason that we saw him move on from the Ravens involuntarily. Like at some point, John Harbaugh was like, I can't with this guy anymore. And they moved on to a younger generation, and those guys are having a ton of success. And Wink Martindale went to the Giants where he wasn't very successful, and now he's in college. And that just doesn't speak to me as a guy whose trajectory is particularly encouraging right now. So
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just don't know if that's true or not. I'm willing to wait a bit and see, but you could be right. I just don't know that. I want to see how he's in a new situation. Let's see how things play out for him. Obviously, he's been a very successful football coach in the past, and so I'm hoping he'll be a successful football coach in the future.
I mean, we're trying to. The question is, are we grading what's happened so far? Are we grading where we think he's going to go? Obviously,
but also
where he's going to go.
But also, it's like, so he has the Texas game, and you have 1 million RPS numbers for that.
Yeah.
And then he has this game, and you have much fewer because it's like, but is that what he wants to do, or is that what he's being told to do? Like, is that like something that is him self-correcting, or is it being imposed on him from outside? And it kind of feels like the latter because of his press conference talks, both in fall camp and recently, where he doesn't really feel like a guy who's got a ton of introspection to him. So I don't know. I'm glad that we were seeing a reduction in the weird stuff, but I'm still concerned that like when push comes to shove, people kind of revert to who they are, and that might crop up in some important junctures here.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's where I'm at too. I think that when I was grading McDonald in 2021, he was making some of the same mistakes. And McDonald, and it was frustrating. It took him a while to realize that, no, you can't, put a 400-pound defensive lineman and have him run across the field when the other team's not changing, right? Because in the NFL, you have time to change your defense. In college, it's like if they don't change a guy, you're not allowed to. And he was also blitzing his nickel from far away, which is not something you do when you have a defensive line that's going to beat. There's no play that's going to last long enough against our defensive line that a nickel who's blitzing from past the hash mark is going to have time to get there. So it's just something that like you need to get this feel. And I leave open the possibility you can. Mike McDonald certainly adjusted. And Mike McDonald, by the Ohio State game, had it down. And especially had Ohio State down. And there are some times where Wink is just, he's got him too. There were a couple times in the red zone where USC's looking for that nickel blitz, and they run like a split flow with the tight end leaking out into the flat. They ran it 3 times. Every single time it either lost yards or got no yards. And it was that you could tell they were looking for Michigan to bring the nickel blitz. And in fact, they sim pressure the nickel blitz one time and get him to pull the ball, get Moss to pull it and throw it to the tight end. And that was the play that Jair up ended the tight end, and that guy had to leave the game because he comes down in his neck. And by the way, I hope he's okay. But that play was in the offense because they thought Wink is going to do. They thought they're going to get him right, and they can't get him, and Michigan benefits from it. So Wink, he mentioned this in his press conference too, that if teams think he's going to blitz all the time, it's good for them because they're gonna have the wrong call. He's just hang in there, Wink. Begging you, because as Brian says, he doesn't feel like he wants to. It doesn't feel like that's who he is. But if you can just hang in there and do it, man, you can do this.
Well, anyway. Yeah, I didn't take it as a particularly good sign that he was accusing people of not knowing how many people cross the line of scrimmage.
Yeah,
he's like, they don't know the difference between a creeper and a sim blitz and an actual blitz. Like, no, people can count.
Yeah,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a blitz. Like, bro, come on.
That press conference did not make me more confident that, but
get real.
The one other thing is, there are quarterbacks who hate pressure. Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins, neither one plays well under pressure. And there are quarterbacks who love pressure. NFL coordinators knew that if you tried to pressure Tom Brady, forget it. He would kill you. And Moss seems to be sort of in the latter. He seems to play better when he's looking at pressure than when he is.
Now all the Lincoln Riley guys are like that.
And I mean and so I'm not sure. And
how would you tell? Because was there a single snap in this game where he wasn't running for his life? I don't think so.
Well, there were some, and there were some, but I think actually, didn't you chart this, Seth? And it was a good charting where you had like when Michigan brought 3 was probably the least successful passing downs for USC, and I think their most successful ones are when they brought 5. May not be enough of a data point, but still,
it's not entirely true because Michigan's still screwing our coverage. I know Miz wants to get to a break here.
Okay, sorry.
Seat, so.
Sorry, Miz.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I mean, trust me, I love the conversation. I just know that if I don't take a break, that I'm pretty sure I'm gonna piss someone off. I'm gonna piss someone off inside the studio. So we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll get back into the conversation and look to Minnesota. Plus, Do want to get your guys' thoughts on the story out of UNLV, which actually now has has got the same thought, the same kind of view of things from our previous opponent with USC. We'll get to that and much more. The MGoBlog Roundtable on the Big 1050 WTK and on Big 1050 WTKA TV on our stream on the Big1050.com. Words are hard.
Sorry.
I don't
also
know.
hard as rank is making this group stop talking for a minute.
Well, I mean, I just don't know how exactly to go about explaining like what the stream is called nowadays. You know, not with the brand change that we had, you know, a couple weeks ago. I'm like,
right.
What are we calling it now? I don't know.
But yeah, I mean, Craig, I think one of the things you're talking, the problem with their rush 3 is it works great when everyone's good in coverage, and Josiah Stewart is actually getting really good in coverage. Like there's no holes in his game now. He's got to be going in the first round. I mean, from that tape on this game,
I saw that you had listed him now as an All-American, so
he's going to be an All-American easily. But I mean, I have an idea of how NFL coordinators look at what they want, and one of the things they like is versatility, because then they get to call things and make them look smart. Josiah Stewart's one of those guys that makes a defensive coordinator look smart. But God, we haven't talked about Makari Page's game. And then it turned out I was wrong on Jair Hill's. I thought Jair Hill was responsible for stopping on the touchdown to the corner. And then Sharon said, no, that was on Makari Page as well. That they were running cover 2 and that Jair's supposed to stop in case there's a comeback and he has an opportunity for a pick right there. And, you know, Makari just doesn't get over, which, you know, that's a way to run cover 2, obviously. And you add that one to, there was another pressure with 3 guys. Michigan they have 4 receivers out there because they were leaving all these guys in to help protect. So those rushing 3 works because you're going to catch the other team with, you know, max protection all the time against this defensive line. And they do. There's only 4 receivers out in routes. They have 8 guys in coverage. Everybody should be coned. And Makari Page just wanders into the middle of the field for some reason. And they get a touchdown out of it. So the breakdowns are another problem. And like people are saying, oh, you're blaming Wink for the breakdowns. I'm not. I put those on the players. And Makari Page had a really, he also missed he had a sack lined up, and Miller
that was the only good play they had. That was the only big play USC had in the first half, right?
Yeah.
Exactly one.
And that play as well, Zeke Berry's got a, I mean, some of it's just young players, right? We saw Jair Hill making mistakes before. Apparently, Jair's big mistake this game wasn't even his mistake. But Zeke Berry made a couple of big mistakes too, and also some really big plays. He gritted out with volume. But like he's got to realize down in distance. He's following a drag. He's got to go through an umpire, and then he's got to go through a tight end. And he's getting there, and he wants to get a pass breakup. But he's got to realize he's only 3 yards away from line of scrimmage on 3rd and 11. And like all you got to do is tackle that guy for a 4-yard gain, and they're off the field. But that's just a young player. He hasn't played a lot recently. And I know he's a junior, he's a 3rd-year player, but he's a redshirt sophomore who hasn't played very much, and he's going to get it. It's just it comes. So those are the breaks. It's just the safeties are not that good at blitzing, and they want to use them, but it's another one of those knocks against how Wink Martindale's using his defense, because Makari, he just hasn't done it very much. And Moss, he did that on purpose to him. He sits in there, he waits for him, and then he waits for the last second and dodges out of the way. And it's like it's an athletic play. It's a basketball play. It's it's a backyard play. And, it's the kind of thing that you should be able to get away with against a senior, except for Makari's not really blitzed that much. He's been our deep safety for most of his career.
Yeah, I thought Moss was pretty good, especially perhaps considering the amount of pressure he was under. I think USC's offense at least is going to be trouble for a lot of teams going forward.
Oh, certainly. I mean, Michigan was their worst match. This is I was talking to a USC guy, and he said Michigan's by far our worst matchup because the offensive line is good but not great, and they come up against a great defensive line. It's a worry. They the one thing that they can't stop is they're not great tacklers. right? That's the one problem on their defense. So like you put a Kalel Mullings against them, and it's like, ugh.
Mhm.
And then, you know, they're a pro passing offense, and this defense was built to stop CJ Stroud. Even under Wink Martindale, the concept of the defense is still anti CJ Stroud, and they're the most CJ Stroud offense in football right now.
All right. So we're coming back from break here. So we got about 5-6 minutes to kind of wrap things up and go from there.
You want to talk Minnesota or anything, or what do you want from us?
Yeah, we can talk Minnesota, kind of get into the Minnesota game, and if we got time, maybe we can hit on that UNLV story that came up yesterday.
Okay.
Is he the only one? I'm surprised that there's only one.
And we're back here on the Big 1050 WTKA online, thebig1050.com. Of course, we are on our stream on YouTube, Facebook, and on IG. Matt Missler, Miz, filling in for Sam and Ira. Sam obviously out today. He's been out all week with the unfortunate passing of his brother. And Ira and some of the guys from the station are actually heading up for the funeral today. So any thoughts and prayers, well wishes, and condolences, send it to the Webb family. But as of right now, it sounds like Sam wants to be back in the air chair tomorrow. We'll just see if he is okay to come back on the air chair tomorrow. But all the best wishes to Sam and the Webb family as they're going through a very tough time right now. As the MGoBlog Roundtable rolls on with Seth Fisher, Craig Ross, and Brian Cook. And I think it's okay to put the USC in the rear view and look ahead to the game this week coming up on Saturday, 12 noon, right here on the Big 1050 and on Fox. Michigan, Minnesota. Minnesota did not. I mean, to me, it started there. I feel like Minnesota fans are starting to not really buy into the rowing of the boat mentality nowadays. It just seems like there was a lot of hype when you had the coach, when he was at Western. He comes over to Minnesota, and now you're seeing the canoe now has a lot more patches, a lot more holes than there is.
I mean,
they're performing at about the level that they performed under Glenn Mason, and then, like, they're
Jerry
Minnesota
Hill.
football, and like this is. But I think the alarming thing from them this year is they really can't run the ball at all.
Mhm.
And that's been their identity the last few years under what's his face?
Oh, he's the guy
What's
at
his name?
Rutgers now.
No, the head coach. But they've been an RP.
How can we forget the guy?
PJ Fleck.
PJ Fleck.
So like they've been a very like
Flex, yeah.
downhill run RPO team. And this year they just don't have it. And Darius Taylor's been kind of in and out of the lineup, so that's hurt them a little bit. But they've always had a number of guys who can run the ball, and right now they don't have that. And what they're kind of subsisting on is a dink and dunk FCS quarterback who's come in and looks like he's relatively polished, but has a pop gun arm. And Daniel Jackson's a pretty good receiver, but they just aren't what they have been in terms of physical running offense. And I just, if they have to drop back this New Hampshire transfer like 45 times against this defensive line, I mean, I just hear the Tecmo Bowl injury music already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they were playing Iowa, which is Iowa can always mess with you. But if we want to take takeaways from a Minnesota fan perspective, you're going into Michigan, and you play an Iowa game where the problems are, one, you cannot tackle their running back, and two, the quarterback doesn't know what he's looking at and throws the ball anyway. The last team in the world you want to face after a game like that is Michigan. So this might just be another one of those. Minnesota's what they've become is now bad. Now, what Minnesota was last year was actually kind of a tough test for Michigan. They run a lot of stretch. They use the fact that Michigan wants to play with a light box, and they got some. They had some good drives last year because they could just stretch them out and Mason Graham eventually was just like, I'm just going to go ham, and destroyed those guys with a club on his hand. But that's, if that's not working this year, I think they're in trouble. as Brian said, like the quarterback doesn't have a popgun arm. He's used to dealing with very simple defenses, and he just shredded simple defenses last year when he was at New Hampshire. But you put him against Iowa, and he looks terrible. And he looks terrible because Iowa is another one of those teams that gets in good zones, and they make it hard on you, and they make they screw with your eyes. So if Michigan's screwing with his eyes, he could throw a couple really bad picks.
Yeah, he looks okay to me, but they're running. But just okay, and but their running game looks pretty inert. I just don't see the Minnesota offense doing much of anything in this game. I'll be surprised if they do.
I wish we'd taken that left tackle from them. I wish
Yeah,
there was a portal guy to take.
Yeah, according to Alex, the right side of their line is not very good. The right tackle isn't good, I think it is. Or no, the right guard isn't good.
Dude.
The center is not really very good either.
So you're saying it's going to be a big Josiah Stewart day is what you're going to say, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Eric Moore is really on the left side. So
okay, so
yeah, the left tackle is good.
Okay.
If Josiah Stewart has a good game against their left tackle, well, Josiah
he already had one last year.
Yeah,
like that was the game.
Same
where
guy.
Arianti Ursary.
Yeah.
And he had, I think, 2 sacks last year, and Ursary gave up more pressures against Stewart than he had year to date last year. That was like the game where he turned the corner, literally and figuratively.
Yeah, I was gonna say, there's a literally for you.
So I just expect them to die in a fire on offense, and then Michigan should be able to pound out enough run game to win this, in a slugfest, but something like 20-7.
Yeah, that feels right to me. I sure would like to see some reads on offense with Orji, but I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, that's going to be the interesting thing in this game is how much have they now scouted what Michigan wants to do with Orji and respond to it. I guess they're going to bring down safeties and see if Michigan has any plans for a QB or something like that.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll be right. So, and their defense isn't awful, I don't think, but they had a hard time tackling the running back at Iowa. I know that
they've been a terrible tackling team for a few years now. That's been the problem on defense, and it's really not. It's a well-designed defense. I think they might even be fairly well coached. It's just they're not that talented, right? They're the guys they can get to Minnesota, and that hurts them when you get in a box with a guy, and it's really just going to come down to talent, and that's what's been happening to them. And Iowa put them in a box. And Iowa's got a great running back too, but so do we. So
yeah, I mean, it was a comparison of the Michigan and Iowa game. I think they said they combined for less than 100 yards passing in both of the games from this past Saturday. This popped up on the stream. We're going to wrap up here in a second, but someone gave their score prediction through YouTube. I got to highlight this because if this is the case, this may be one of the more oddball scoregamis ever. No, not that one. This one right here. 25-11.
Well, that's
a Brian Cook score. That's the kind of score Brian picks. That's how Brian picks 12-9 or 12.
No, those are field goals. Those are easy.
Okay.
We haven't now. We've had 2 games in a row with no Zavada field goals, and he's getting mad at us.
Yeah.
So I mean, as long as there's as long as there's a notch in the W call, I think you'll be a-okay. But guys, guys, appreciate you not getting me fired, and hopefully this gets sent down the line to the program director and everything goes over. So guys, enjoy the game on Saturday, and next week we'll see if we can try to put a bug in Sam's ear, talk about the hockey season starting up next week. As well, since they get going next week,
and
next Friday.
And all the love to Sam's family. We really are thinking about him a lot here.
Absolutely. So yeah, any love, thoughts, prayers, any kind of well wishes that our listeners have, send it to the Webb family because they could use it this time without a doubt. So guys, thank you very much for joining me today and allowing me to be a part of the roundtable today. And before I get out of here, how about I get another person into the Victor's Lounge for the Wolverine Rental Countdown and Kickoff this Saturday. 8 o'clock is when we open up the doors over at Joe's Garage. You and a guest can join us with food from the Heidelberg, delicious beverage from Bud Light, and we just need you to bring the atmosphere. Caller 7 right now at 734-998-1050. You get to join Sam, Ira, Steve, and Goose for the pregame show and a whole bunch of fun leading up to Michigan, Minnesota for the noon kickoff for the Brown Jug. Other than that, everyone have a great rest of your Thursday, and everyone will talk to you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA Ann Arbor, a Cumulus Media station.
All right.
All right, Brian, I'll see you in a